Hello, I'm Dan Sullivan. I am a programmer at Film at Lincoln Center and a member of the selection committee for the rescheduled 2020 edition of New Directors, New Films, our annual co-presentation with the Museum of Modern Art. I want to thank you all for joining us this year and for bearing with us as we tried to figure out a way to reschedule and coordinate this edition of the festival. I want to thank the distributor of the film that you just saw, Identifying Features. I want to thank their distributor, Kino Lorber, for collaborating with us on this. And I think that's all the housekeeping, so we'll just get right into it. I want to welcome my guests, our guests, Fernanda Valadez, the director of Identifying Features, and the producer and co-writer, Astrid Rondero. Hello, Fernanda and Astrid.
Hello. Hello, Dan.
So I thought perhaps it would make sense, given you're both here, to begin by talking about the writing process and all the work on that front that went into Identifying Features. I was wondering, maybe we should start with the structure, because it's very interesting what you do with the kind of dual protagonist structure, the sort of intersecting lines, almost like but there's also kind of a road movie element, but like presumably like a road movie unlike one most people have seen before. So could you just tell us a little bit about how the writing of the film proceeded, maybe beginning by sort of the initial like genesis of the film?
Around, because all this goes quite a few years back, around 2011, we were experiencing in Mexico a lot of violence that I think was different from what we had experienced before in terms of quantity, but also in terms of the brutality of the violence. And I wanted to tell a story that could not necessarily portray, but kind of express this humanitarian crisis that we have been living since then. So I wrote a short film about the mother looking for her missing son, and it already contained the element of the young man that has been deported from the US and it's making his way back home. And that short film was kind of an essay, but I realized I wanted to make a broader story that could effectively talk about this humanitarian crisis. So we completely rewrote, and I think Astrid was really important for the story to incorporate more elements and to play more with the structure. So I think she can tell you more about that.
Yeah, well, basically what we started working on, because at some point I was telling Fernanda that I felt like for me was hard to make a feature out of a short film, because I felt like the experience at what she wanted to tell was already told in the short film. But she was really adamant that she felt like it was important to make it a feature. So we started to discussing about the elements that we wanted to keep, because the center of the story is basically the same. And that's how we started to understand that. And at that time, that's something important. The type of violence started to change also. And people from middle classes started to fall prey to this kind of situations. So we wanted to do that, to try to portray that somehow it starts taking all types of people and not only migrants, not only rural communities, that it was happening everywhere. And I think that was basically what we tried to do with the feature. Also, the idea of the the structure that road movies have, of people crossing paths. I think that was something that really helped us, like having like a broader view of what is happening in Mexico. So it was really interesting working on that, and we took a lot of elements out of how do you say, of the work of journalists, because in Mexico we have a lot of work of journalists that they also fall prey to violence, and it was that was the way we worked at that time, and it was really interesting.
Yeah, it was a great collaboration, I think.
Yeah, I was wondering. I mean, I believe this was mentioned a few times in some pieces that were published about the film after the Sundance premiere earlier this year. It's like the film does a very successful, like admirable job evading a lot of the cliches that you find in particularly, like, I think, American films about the situation. I don't know if I should name, something like Sicario or whatever, these really like dire, like this is hell on earth kind of films. Could you, I was wondering to what degree sort of avoiding some of those cliches or tropes or what have you was kind of on your mind while you were writing it, because I think the way that you treat the subject of the film accounts for like a lot of its kind of like how moving and powerful it is in this context. So.
I think we weren't thinking probably in terms of avoiding the cliches, but I think our objective was to make a journey, an emotional journey alongside the character. And I think that was the key of many of our decisions in terms of how much information to give the audience in terms of what's happening around, and also the type of the encounters we wanted to portray between this character and the other people she met along the way. I think for both of us, it was really important to awaken in the audience empathy and not shock and not social or political interest. I think for me as a Latin American filmmaker, I'm always kind of anxious in terms of I don't want to be like a curiosity to the rest of the world. I want to talk about human beings that are, even though we have our difference in terms of social context and our culture, but we are all similar. So I think that was what made us take some decisions in terms of how to make our characters. I don't know.
Yeah, basically it's the point of view. Like, if you go to the obvious point of view of these characters that perhaps work in the drug dealing business or things like that, that's how these cliches are made. And I think that the great idea of Fernanda, even from the very beginning of the idea of the short film, was trying to track this woman that basically knows nothing about what's happening in Mexico. She only knows her context. And that's the reason why I feel like we kind of get a way of avoiding the cliches of the genre.
Mm-hmm. And it seems like a part of what draws the viewer in, and kind of the thing that draws the viewer into that journey, particularly, I think, or one of the things is the film's pacing. It's very methodical, very measured. So I was just wondering if perhaps maybe this is more for Fernanda, I'm not sure, but like if you could talk a bit about the editing of the film and sort of finding the very distinctive rhythm that it has.
So that was a really fun process to do, and we also credited with another editor that jumped in at the end, an American editor and director based in New York, Susi Corda. So I think more pace, it's kind of slow, and Astrid, it's more faster. Yeah, even the way she speaks and I speak, I can speak slow. And I think when Susi helped us towards the final cut, it was kind of understand the rhythm of us, but primarily of the film. So she even kind of joked, and when I was working on a scene, she told me, to cut more. And when Astrid was working another scene, she told her to add some frames. So it was kind of a negotiation to try to find this slow pace, slow burn film I wanted to tell, but without boring the audience. Because at some point, I think if I had done it just myself, it would have been quite too long.
And yeah, I mean, and so much. It also seems like so much of the kind of emotional, affective, like heavy lifting in the film has to do with a lot of the visual ideas, of which this film is quite dense with visual ideas, I think. Maybe just to begin with, what can you tell us about your collaboration with your cinematographer? And I want to get into like a landscape and the role of landscape in the film in a moment, but maybe we could just begin by sort of talking about that relationship.
Well, I was absolutely fortunate to work with Claudia Voss, the DP. And I've known her for quite a long time, but I hadn't worked with her. And I think Claudia has the best of two worlds because she has a lot of experience shooting documentaries. So she's very agile, and she's the kind of DP that is ready all the time to just capture the perfect moment. But at the same time, she's very creative and has a great eye also to work with light, natural light or artificial light. So it was kind of a great combo, and she's also really, really generous, and we just pretty much played a lot and tried to experiment a lot. Our budget was extremely tight, so we had to be experimental in terms of, okay, so we just have the light from the fire, or we just have the light from the sun, or just a box of matches or a couple of candles. What can we do? And I think we decided, or we had to decide what was more valuable in terms of the image. And we thought that time was the most valuable asset, and we had the opportunity to wait for the right time of the day to shoot a scene. And if it didn't turn out okay, then we would come back and do it again. So in that sense, the film was unorthodox because we shot during 9 weeks, which is a lot for a Mexican production.
And then sort of like within the context of that relationship, I'm wondering what sort of conversations you perhaps have about the landscapes and the settings, particularly I think in the second half of the film, when it almost there are times when the landscape almost seems to introduce this almost like cosmic or metaphysical kind of element to the film. So just how do you see the place of place in the film?
I think I wanted to begin the film as a naturalistic story because in the end it's a social-oriented story about enforced disappearances and migrants and the families of the missing people. But I wanted to tell, as the film progresses, a more expressive film. And so we were trying that the landscape should become almost an expression of the inner landscapes of the characters. So we tried to make that like I don't know if counterpoint it's the correct expression, but to let the landscape express the emotions of what was going on and become less naturalistic. So we allowed ourselves to use visual metaphors and a language that was not a reflection of what was really happening, but more an interpretation of the characters, like the devil, for example.
Mm-hmm. And there's a shift in the palette of the film throughout is like very, very distinctive, I think. But then it changes across the film too. Yeah, I mean, I'm just yeah. So I guess it might make sense to discuss like the role color plays and the kind of significance of that shift across the film.
Well, that's something that almost no one notices, and it's that kind of the things that is yours. I think it was more useful for me and for Claudia than something that the audience really gets. But we try to make a shift across the color spectrum. So the film begins more with greens, and then it shifts to yellow, and then it goes to red, and it ends in magenta. And we wanted the last shot of the film of the devil that we know is the sun coming out of the flames to contain all the colors in the spectrum. Because the way I thought in the film's road movie, it's also a search of the truth that's behind the disappearance of the boy, and it's a harsh truth that shifts the way the mother feels her relationship towards the two sons that she has in the end. So I think shifting from green to magenta, which is the opposite. I mean, it's kind of all too mental, but it's something that we enjoy doing, and we tried, even though the audience cannot understand that because it's not possible to understand that, but hopefully it lands emotionally in terms of shifting to red. It becomes harsher and I think raw, perhaps.
I'd now like to ask you and Astrid about the actors, given the really well, particularly like the two lead performances. But maybe could you two sort of tell us or let's begin maybe with the casting, and maybe you two can tell us a bit about how that proceeded. And I imagine you have like a very particular kind of criteria for what you were looking for. So
yeah.
Sí, empieza si quieres.
Well, I had already worked with Mercedes Hernandez, the main actress, in the short film we shot before this film, and also David Illescas, which is the actor that plays Miguel, the young man deported from the US. And I was sure I wanted to work with them again. They're both quite experienced and recognized actors in Mexico, both in film and theater. The rest of the cast, it's mostly local art actors from my hometown, Guanajuato, and most of them non-professional actors. And I had been wanting to work this way for quite some time, and even though it's complicated in terms of how to prepare with them, because the professional actors expect a much more detail and profound work of the design of the character. And as in comparison, when you're working with non-professional actors, I think it's not so useful to discuss in terms of concepts and ideas, but more in terms of how to become playful and ready just to play with fiction. But I enjoyed it a lot, and it was a great experience working with both the different type of actors, the professional and non-professional.
Yeah, I would because I wanted to. I mean, you sort of answered this already, but I wanted to ask specifically about working with the non-professionals in the film, but actually maybe because it seems like it left an impression on you, the kind of dynamic between the professional actors and the non-professional actors. Maybe what were some of your impressions on how those types of performances sort of like combined or had a collision or what have you?
You should talk about the workshop with the young actors, because that was very interesting. We were like for months looking for the young actors in rural schools in Guanajuato, So when we finally picked the last candidates for the characters of the two young boys, Fernanda made a workshop with well, if you want to no, they made a workshop that was really enlightening for everyone in the team, because we got to see how you prepare with a non-professional actor. And it was my sister, she's a producer and an actress herself, so she made the workshop, and it was really good for bonding, but also for Fernanda to understand how to make them play in terms of feel playful and relax in a scene. And it was very interesting what happened there. So I think that when we went to principal photography with the non-professional actors, they already had a good sense of what they needed to do. So I think that made the growth easier.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm very grateful with Lisette, Astrid's sister, because I think what both all type of actors, professional, non-professional, what they all share and what we share in general is that the understanding that fiction and acting, it's the possibility of being for a moment in someone else's shoes. So it's a game we'll know how to play, because that's part of being human. That's the basis of empathy, I think. And I think that was very it was just fun, and for me it gave me an understanding that I think I didn't have before about acting in general. And I think that was even useful for Mercedes, because even though she's very, very experienced, this hunger and this playfulness of these young people, that they so much wanted to become the characters, and at the same time they knew perfectly well it was fiction. It also gave her this spontaneity and this like reconnection to the essence of acting, I think. And it was amazing for all of us.
I think I wanted to conclude maybe by talking about the film, I guess the film's reception, the timing's funny because like I saw it in January at Sundance, and then obviously, we all know what happened a month and a half later, but I was wondering, well, first of all, I was wondering if you had like any opportunity to screen the film in Mexico yet, and maybe sort of, I guess I'm especially curious about what like the Mexican audience thinks of the film so far, since we know it's been quite well received on the sort of international festival circuit. So.
Well, we got the chance to screen the film just recently at the Morelia Film Festival, and the reception was really good. We felt really, like, how you say it, like relieved, because at some point that's something that happens a lot in Mexico, that when you talk about the topics, like these kind of topics that are so hard for us, sometimes you get the fear of that the community sees this film as if we're like treating bad the situation or getting an advantage of it, and sometimes they even talk about like using these types of stories to I don't know, just to get the attention or things like that. And when we decided on making this film, it was like this scenario was really, really palpable in Mexico. Like they were saying, "Oh, just stop talking about violence. You should do some other films. We have so many things, very interesting things that you can tackle in your first film." So when we decided on doing this film, we really did it because we felt like it was important. So we were scared a little bit that the reception was going to be difficult. And it was, on the contrary, I think the audience loved it, and we felt like they felt what we wanted to say in the film. Like there's a lot of darkness in the film, and it's a very terrible situation, but we're also talking about all these characters that are trying to make a difference, especially the mothers, the
yeah.
families in Mexico, they've become like very important, how do you say it, like activists in Mexico. They're really doing the job that the authorities aren't doing. So for us, it was like a relief that it was so well received.
Yeah, I think we both were scared that the Mexican audience would feel like this film was for festivals, or like this film was for international audiences, and feel deception and even deceitfulness. And but I think they felt it talked about something important, something. I forgot the word. Próximo, something close to them, and I think we both felt, besides relief, we felt very happy.
That's a nice note, as nice a note as any to end on. But I want to thank both of you very much for being here, for sticking with us as we tried to figure out when we could actually do New Directors this year. And yeah, hopefully we'll all get to hang out in person at some other context. I don't know, but thank you both so much.
Thank you. We're very happy to be on screen with you.
Finally.